This story happened to me last year. It's the first time I can speak about it and has given me nightmares since then. I hope I can get some help just by talking about this. It happened at 3:30 in the morning. I woke up and was having trouble falling asleep again. I remember trying for about an hour, but I just couldn't. I got up and went downstairs to get a glass of water. When I reached the kitchen, I realized the back door was open. I was confused because I didn't remember leaving it unlocked. I tried remembering if I had opened it before going to bed, but I couldn't figure it out. So I just closed it and went back to bed. While I was trying to sleep, I felt different this time. I couldn't stop thinking about the back door being open. Could it be that someone has entered my house while I was sleeping? Was someone in my house all this time? I asked this question to myself over and over until something that made my skin crawl happened. I heard a noise coming from the dark corner of my room, between the closet and the wall. I turned on the light, and in the corner, there was a man looking at me. I was frozen, looking at him. He was old and had this crazy grin on his face. He was just looking at me. I will never forget that look. I managed to gather some courage and ran downstairs with my phone in hand. I called the cops. A few minutes later, they appeared and took him in. They told me he had been living in the attic for at least a few days. I moved out of that place and will never live in a home with an attic again. I live with my boyfriend in a small apartment. It's enough for us because we don't really have a lot of stuff and we just want to start our lives together. The apartment is in a small community where we practically know everyone. It's quiet and safe, or so we thought. The other night, we were on the couch watching a movie. It was around midnight when we started listening to someone knocking at the door. I looked at Sam, my boyfriend, and he looked surprised at me and asked if I was waiting for someone at this time, to which I replied, "Who receives guests at midnight?" Anyway, Sam went to the door and looked through the peephole, but there was no one there. He came back to the couch and tried to calm me down, saying that maybe it was nothing, or someone mistakenly knocked at our door. He didn't look sure of what he was saying, but I tried to forget about it and just continued watching the movie. Around 10 minutes later, it happened again. Someone knocked again. This time, me and Sam went to the door. He looked through the peephole. Someone was at the door, but not close. Sam could only see a silhouette of someone in the middle of the hallway. Sam asked who it was, but we got no answer. He told me to grab my phone and be prepared to call 911 just in case. He told me he was going to open the door to see who was there. Because the door has a security chain, I felt better, but I was still scared. Sam starts opening the door, and as soon as he does, the arm of a man passes between. It sounded like a man because he kept screaming at us to leave his house. We stood back and watched this happen. Meanwhile, I had already called the cops and they were on their way. But while we waited, the man did not stop for a second. I saw his eye in between the door while he was swinging his arm. Those were the eyes of a psycho. Who knows what he was going to do to us? Cops came and took him away. I couldn't sleep that night, and Sam and I considered leaving the house, but we put everything into this place, so we have no choice. I hope I never see that man again. I was washing dishes when it happened for the first time. It started with small stomps on the wooden floor. It kept me guessing on what it was because I live alone with no pets. It must have been noises from the house settling, I thought. One night while watching TV, I could swear I heard whispering behind me. It scared the living crap out of me. I couldn't make out where exactly the noises were coming from, but they were getting more and more intense. Scratching and whispering at the same time. It was like I couldn't make out exactly what it was, but it was definitely happening. It has been like this every single night, but the noises change sometimes. There are nights I listen to the pipes, like someone is hitting them. Other nights come the whispers and loud stomps on the floor. It's like other people are living here with me. I am already spooked, but I am trying to be rational about this. Also, I cannot move out because I have nowhere else to go, and I put my money in this house. Now, if this wasn't enough, a few nights ago I started having weird dreams that happened in my house. It started with the door under the stairs, the one that leads to the basement. It was just me staring at the door, but something felt different. It was like the door was calling to me. I have been several times in my basement, but never felt like this. It was like a dark aura was around the door. It made me not want to go to the basement again, or even get close to that door. Luckily, I mostly use the basement for storage, so I don't really have to use it often. I kept dreaming about the door, always thinking there would be something reasonable that could explain what was happening. That was until my last dream. The door started opening and I got closer and peeked inside. That's when I saw pairs of eyes coming from the darkness below. And behind them, slowly I started making out a creature with horns. I woke up at that moment in horror. What are these nightmares? What is happening to me? Is my basement door some kind of gateway to somewhere? I don't know what to do. I am a security guard at a local parking lot. There isn't much to say about it, but I do like it. I don't have to deal with a lot of people and I can enjoy the silence of the night. That was until last night. I was in my chair in front of the monitors when I saw something outside. It was snowing, but I could have sworn I saw something out there. At first, I didn't pay much attention because I lost it somehow. But then I sat down again in my chair, and after a while, I started listening to weird humming noises coming from the outside. I looked at the monitors to check what was out there, and that's when I saw something on top of the roof. It looked like a person, at least the shape, but I didn't have a clear picture of what it was until it appeared in front of my window. Panicking, I got up and leaned against the wall. In this situation, we can call for help from the central, and that's what I did, but no one answered. While I was on the radio, the thing was trying to pull down the door. I tried speaking, but to no avail. It tried again to pull the door down, so I took out my gun and fired a few shots. After that, there was only silence and the wind blowing outside. I was on edge the rest of the night, still not knowing what it was. I have to go to work again tonight. This story happened to me when I was 13 years old. It was Friday night and my parents were allowing me to stay home alone for the first time. They were also taking my little baby sister over to my grandparents. So for the next several hours, I was going to have the house to myself. I didn't waste any time getting the night started as soon as they left. I watched a marathon of horror movies on cable while I proceeded to eat a combination of French bread pizza along with other junk food from the pantry. I also remember drinking liters of soda as well. And since this was before smartphones, I decided to put the laptop on a folding tray next to the couch so I could surf the net while I watched movies and ate. It was basically pure heaven for a kid my age. But after a few hours into the night, I started to hear what sounded like footsteps above me on the second floor. I also started feeling a little creeped out for some reason, but I figured it was because it was the first time I was staying home by myself. The horror movies I was watching were definitely not helping either. However, just as I was about to dismiss the feeling of uneasiness, I heard something from upstairs. Even though it took a few seconds to process it, it sounded exactly like my mom. I muted the TV to see if the sound would happen again. After a couple seconds of hearing nothing, I assumed it was just my ears playing tricks on me. But before I could unmute the TV, I heard it again. "Jeremy, come upstairs," it said, sounding like my mom. I shot up from my seat, shocked and confused at what I just heard. Did my parents come back already? I said to myself. I thought maybe that I didn't hear them coming home because the TV was on too loud. I made my way upstairs to greet my family and find out why they were back earlier than expected. But as soon as I got to the second floor, I realized how all the lights upstairs were still off. And as I proceeded to open all the doors to the bedroom, there were no signs of anybody being home. I was beyond confused at that point. I was sure I'd just heard my mother saying my name. Was I just hearing things? I thought to myself. Maybe the horror movies were really affecting me more than I thought they would. But as soon as I thought I might be going crazy, that's when I hear something that I'll never forget. I would hear my mother's voice again, but this time it sounded sinister. And worst of all, it was right behind me. Jeremy, turn around. My body felt like it was full of pins and needles. Something felt wrong. I was petrified. I whipped my head around to see who was standing behind me, but when I did, there was nobody there. I quickly ran downstairs, not daring to look back again. I was too terrified at the thought that if I did, I would see something horrible right behind me, chasing me. When I reached the living room, I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do. I didn't know whether to run out of the house or just call my parents. But before I even had a chance to decide, that's when I started to hear voices all around me. This time, it sounded like both my father and my mother saying my name. I even heard what sounded like the cries of my baby sister. By that point, I couldn't move. I was frozen. I honestly thought I was going to die. Looking for anything that could help me, I grabbed a crucifix that was on the wall nearby. Even though I was never really religious, at that moment, I was desperate. The voices started to sound like they were coming closer and closer. I closed my eyes and started to pray, and just as it felt like the voices were about to close in on me, it stopped. By then, I couldn't hear anything other than my prayers and heart beating. And even though I was so afraid that I was shaking, I mustered up the courage to open my eyes. Fortunately, there was nobody in the living room but me. Even then, I couldn't convince myself to move and run out of the house. I was too scared that the voices would start again. While I was nervously looking around, I noticed something on the dresser. Sitting atop it was an old wooden statue that my parents had bought from an estate sale a few weeks ago. I remember noticing how ever since they bought it, weird things had started happening around the house, but nothing to the extent of what I just experienced. Before I could even think further, that's when the sounds of a baby crying started again from upstairs. And then shortly after, something that sounded like a group of footsteps from the second floor slowly made their way towards the top of the stairs. Not giving it a second thought, I quickly grabbed the statue and threw it to the ground, smashing it. Just as I did, the sound stopped. I spent the rest of the night sitting on the sidewalk in front of our house, waiting for my parents. When I told them what had happened, not only did they not believe me, but they never let me stay home alone again until years later. They also grounded me for breaking the statue, but I didn't mind since nothing happened again after that night. Something that did happen because of that incident, however, is that to this day, I started going to church more regularly.
I was staying over at my aunt and uncle's house for a few weeks during summer break from college. Even though my cousins were a lot younger than I was, it was actually fun hanging out with them. Since I lived in the city, we didn't really see each other much. Plus, it was my first time staying over at the new house the family had just bought. It was a pretty nice house, but the area was kind of secluded. The house was surrounded by trees, and the unfenced backyard would stretch all the way into the tree line of the forest. As nice and peaceful as it looked sometimes, admittedly, it creeped me out as well. There'd be times that I would look out into the forest and get that feeling like somebody was staring back. Honestly, the area was so vast that somebody could actually camp out there and we wouldn't even know it. One afternoon, when my aunt, uncle, and cousins went to go and run some errands, I decided to stay home and catch up on working out. After taking a shower, I made my way downstairs to the living room to retrieve some exercise equipment. But just as I was in the process of doing so, that's when I heard the sound of the back door by the kitchen begin to burst open. At that moment, my mind and heartbeat started racing. Did somebody just break in? I asked myself. A part of me was so shocked that I must have been in denial, because I thought that there was a possibility that maybe it was just the wind. Also, the family had a large Rottweiler who was kept outside. For sure, I thought to myself. I would have heard him barking if there was an intruder. But any doubt I had went away when I heard the footsteps of what sounded like a large man making his way through the clutter of the kitchen. Right then and there, I knew I had to either run or hide. I figured there was no way I had enough time to escape out the front door. So instead, I decided to hide behind one of the large curtains by the window in the living room. Since the fabric draped all the way down to the floor, it actually did a good job of concealing me. I covered my mouth and did my best to stay quiet as I hid. But as much as I wanted to remove myself from the situation, I could hear everything the intruder was saying. He was opening some of the doors on the first floor. At first, I thought it was because he was looking for valuables. But then a sense of dread came over me when I realized he must have been looking to see if somebody was home. Maybe he was looking to see if I was home. I was hoping that the person would just quickly take some valuables and leave. But if he was dead set on turning the place inside out, then I knew I wasn't safe. There was no telling what he would do when he would find me. Thinking I had no choice, I peeked through one of the creases of the curtain. I knew that if he was coming this way, I had to be ready. It wasn't long until the sounds of the intruder finally made its way to the living room. And that's when I was finally able to see him. As scary as it already is to see an intruder in your house, I was even less prepared for what I saw. The intruder was wearing some kind of camouflage that hunters would wear, but he also had bits of leaves and twigs attached all over his uniform like a ghillie suit. But the most jarring thing about him was the expression on his face. I'll never forget the way his eyes pierced through the camo face paint. He was breathing so hard with a look of intense focus, like he was determined to find something or somebody. Even though I wanted to, it took everything I had not to scream at that moment. After taking a few seconds to scan over the living room, he, surprisingly, moved on. He quickly shot up the flight of stairs and went to look about the next floor. That's when I started to debate with myself about what I was going to do next. I knew that it was just a matter of time before he would check any spots he missed, including the large curtains. But I was so scared, I couldn't even get my legs to move. I thought that, at any moment, if he heard me running, he'd be able to chase me down before I could even reach the neighbor's house. While I was struggling to figure out what to do, I could hear him upstairs, ransacking the place and looking everywhere. That's when I finally found the will to move. But before I could even attempt to come out of hiding, I heard the sound of police cars in the distance. Did somebody see him break in and call the cops? I thought to myself. But I knew that it was unlikely, since the neighbors were too far away to see anything. Regardless, I was just happy to hear the sirens. The intruder must have heard them as well, since the next thing I knew, I saw him running down the stairs and fleeing towards the back of the house. Eventually, I would hear him running away outside. I was relieved that he was finally gone, but that feeling wouldn't last long when the sound of the sirens eventually disappeared into the distance. That's when I realized that the cops weren't actually heading towards our house. They were apparently responding to a totally different incident on the other side of town. The sense of relief that I had quickly changed back into a sense of dread. I knew that if the intruder realized the same thing, that there was a good chance that he'd be coming back. Thinking it was now or never, I came out of my hiding spot. I quickly put on a pair of shoes and bolted out of the front door. I ran in the direction of a neighbor's house as fast as I could. During the whole time I was running, I was scared that, at any moment, the intruder would pop out from behind the tree and grab me. But after a few minutes, I was fortunately able to reach the neighbor's house. The old couple who lived there eventually let me in, and we immediately called the cops after I told them what had happened. Shortly after, the police came and searched the whole area. Shockingly, deep in the woods, behind the backyard, they had found several empty water bottles and protein bar wrappings by a tree. The trash looked like it had been piling up in that one spot for at least a few weeks. The cops had concluded that whoever had broken into the house had been scouting the place out for a while. After being told of the disturbing information, my aunt and uncle quickly got the state-of-the-art security system installed the very next day. Oh, and if you're wondering what happened to their supposedly trusty Rottweiler, the cops had found him preoccupied with gnawing on the bone of an old steak. Apparently that's all it took for the intruder to get past him. When it was all said and done, everybody was just happy no one was hurt. But at the end of the day, I still haven't gotten over it. I'm still going through therapy, and I haven't left the city since. Looking back, it's just so creepy to think that all those times that I've been staring into the woods and gotten that feeling that somebody out there was watching us, it was actually because somebody actually was.